Imagine this. It's midnight. The world outside your window swallowed by winter's darkness. The kind of quiet that feels too heavy, too alive. Then, a knock comes at your door, not a friendly tap, not a neighbor's call, but a slow, deliberate knock that carries a weight you can't explain. 1, 2, 3. It stops, but the silence that follows is worse, as if something is waiting, listening for you to make a move. You check the peephole, the windows, but no one's there, or so it seems. Yet the knocks return, night after night, each one louder, more insistent, as if they know you're alone. This isn't a ghost story spun to scare kids around a campfire. This isn't a tale of spirits lingering in sorrow. This is real, raw, and far more terrifying than any phantom. Because sometimes the most horrifying things aren't the dead, they're the living. Or something worse. Something that moves in the shadows, that whispers your name through the cracks of your home. This is the true story of the most unsettling night of my life, when a stranger came knocking at my door at midnight. And what followed wasn't just fear, it was a presence that marked my home, my mind, and left me questioning what was real. The knocks still echo in my nightmares, and sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear them again, as if he's never truly gone. It was a biting February night in 2023, deep in the heart of winter, in a small, isolated town in upstate New York. The air outside was sharp enough to sting, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and froze the world into silence. My house, a modest one-story rental perched on the edge of town, glowed faintly with the warm amber light of a single lamp in the living room. I was 29, a graphic designer working remotely, savoring the solitude of my new home after years in a noisy city apartment. The neighborhood was a sparse grid of old houses, the nearest neighbor a quarter-mile away, separated by snow-dusted fields and barren trees that clawed at the sky. That night, the world felt asleep, wrapped in a stillness so profound it was almost sacred, broken only by the occasional creak of the house settling under the weight of fresh snow. I was winding down, the routine as familiar as breathing. I locked the front and back doors, the deadbolts clicking with a reassuring thud, and checked the windows, their latches cold against my fingers. The heavy curtains were drawn tight, shutting out the winter's chill and the darkness beyond. Inside, the house was warm, the radiator humming softly, its heat battling the cold that pressed against the walls. I made a cup of chamomile tea in the kitchen, the kettle's low whistle filling the silence, the steam curling upward with a faint floral scent. Settling on the couch with a worn paperback, I let the lamp's light cast long shadows across the hardwood floor, the pages rustling as I turned them. Everything felt safe, ordinary, like any other night. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have found this place affordable, quiet, mine. But that peace was fragile, a thin veneer over something I couldn't yet name. Around 11:50 p.m., as I sipped my tea, the house seemed to shift. The radiator's hum faded, though it was still running, and the air grew heavier, as if the walls were holding their breath. The silence deepened, no longer comforting, but oppressive, like the calm before a storm. I paused, my book open on my lap, my ears straining for any sound: a car, a neighbor, the wind, nothing. The clock on the wall ticked louder, its hands creeping toward midnight. I brushed it off as fatigue, my imagination stirred by the isolation and the winter's desolation. Maybe I'd been reading too many thrillers, I told myself, shaking my head. But deep down, a flicker of unease stirred, a primal instinct whispering that something was wrong. I stood to check the locks again, my bare feet cold on the hardwood, the floorboards creaking faintly under my weight. The front door was secure, The back door unchanged, the windows locked tight. Yet the unease lingered, a weight in my chest I couldn't shake. I returned to the couch, telling myself it was nothing, just the quiet of a rural night, playing tricks on my city-bred nerves. But as the clock struck midnight, the silence grew thicker, the house's shadows seeming to stretch longer, as if waiting for something or someone to break the stillness. In just a few minutes, that illusion of safety would shatter, and the quiet I loved would become a trap. Its silence no longer a refuge, but a canvas for terror. The clock had just struck midnight on that frigid February night in 2023. The silence of my isolated house in upstate New York, wrapping around me like a heavy shroud. The warmth of my chamomile tea and the soft glow of the living room lamp had lulled me into a fragile sense of security. But the air had shifted, growing dense, as if the house itself were holding its breath. I sat on the couch, my paperback forgotten, my ears straining against the oppressive quiet that had replaced the radiator's hum. The stillness of the rural night, once comforting, now felt like a trap. The walls of my modest one-story rental seeming to lean inward, their shadows stretching longer than the lamplight should allow. I told myself it was just the isolation, my city-bred nerves unaccustomed to the absence of noise. But a primal unease gnawed at me, whispering that I wasn't alone. It started softly, almost polite. A knock, gentle, tentative, like a visitor unsure of the address. Soft, knocking sound. Tap, tap, tap. I froze, my tea halfway to my lips, the mug's warmth suddenly inadequate against the chill that ran down my spine. The sound came from the front door, clear and deliberate, cutting through the silence like a blade. It was exactly midnight, the clock's ticking now a loud metronome in my ears. I lived alone, miles from any friend, and no one, not a neighbor, not a delivery, had reason to visit at this hour. My heart thudded, a single heavy beat, and I set the mug down, my hands trembling slightly. Was it a branch tapping the window in the wind? The house settling under the snow's weight? My mind scrambled for rational explanations, but the knock had been too precise, too human. Then it came again. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. This time, there was no mistaking it. The knocks were evenly spaced, measured, as if someone stood on the porch with purpose, their hands steady against the wood. My pulse quickened, my breath shallow as I stood, my bare feet cold on the hardwood floor, each step creaking faintly in the silence. The house felt smaller now, the walls pressing in, the lamplight flickering, as if unsure of itself. I crept toward the front door, my shadow stretching long and distorted, my mind racing. Who could be out there in this cold, in this nowhere town, at midnight? A lost driver? A neighbor in trouble? But Mrs. Hargrove, the nearest resident, was elderly, and never left her house after dark. And deep down, a voice whispered, "Something's wrong." I pressed my eye to the peephole, the glass icy against my skin, my breath fogging it slightly. The porch was empty, bathed in the dim, ghostly glow of the streetlight across the road. Snowflakes drifted lazily, undisturbed. The fresh powder pristine, no footprints, no tire tracks, no sign of life. My chest tightened, but I stayed there, ear against the door, listening. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint whistle of wind outside, carrying the scent of snow through the cracks. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, my nerves frayed by the quiet, when it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Louder, more insistent, rattling the doorframe. I jumped back, my heart slamming against my ribs, the sound vibrating through the wood into my hands. The knocks were forceful now, almost demanding, as if whoever was out there knew I was listening, knew I was afraid. I checked the peephole again, my hands shaking. But the porch remained empty. the snow untouched, the streetlights glow unwavering. Yet, the air felt heavier, charged, as if someone stood just out of sight, their presence pressing against the door like a physical weight. I gripped the deadbolt, ensuring it was locked, my fingers lingering on the cold metal. The house's silence mocked me, the shadows in the corners seeming to shift, as if the stranger's intent had seeped inside, waiting for me to make a mistake. The knocks at midnight had shattered the fragile peace of my isolated house in upstate New York, their deliberate rhythm tap, tap, tap still echoing in my mind as I stood frozen in the living room. The air, once warm with the radiator's hum, now felt cold and heavy, as if the house itself were holding its breath, complicit in the stranger's presence. I was 29, a graphic designer living alone in this one-story rental, miles from anyone, and the pristine snow outside showed no footprints, no sign of the figure I was certain had knocked. My heart pounded, my hands trembling as I gripped the deadbolt, its cold metal grounding me against the growing dread. The peephole revealed nothing but an empty porch, yet the silence was worse than the knocks, thick with a presence that seemed to press against the walls, watching, waiting. I backed away from the front door, my bare feet catching on the hardwood floor, each creak amplified in the oppressive quiet. The lamplight flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed to shift at the edges of my vision, as if the house were alive, conspiring with whoever or whatever was outside. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was Mrs. Hargrove, my elderly neighbor a quarter-mile away, confused in the cold. Maybe a lost driver, though no car lights had pierced the darkness. But the knocks had been too deliberate, too human, and the absence of footprints in the snow gnawed at me. My mind raced, replaying the sound knock, 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 like a signal meant for me alone. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table, its screen glowing in the dim room, and checked the signal. Full bars, as always in this house. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over 911. What would I say? Someone knocked and vanished? I'd sound unhinged. I set the phone down, my hands shaking, and crept to the front window, peeling back the curtain just enough to peer outside. The street was empty, the snow untouched, the streetlight's pale glow casting a ghostly sheen over the yard. But the porch light flickered again, its beam stuttering as if struggling against the darkness. I scanned the driveway, the field, the skeletal trees clawing at the sky, nothing. Yet the air felt charged, like a storm about to break, and my chest tightened with the certainty that someone was out there, just beyond my sight. Then, it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Louder, harder, shaking the doorframe. I flinched, the curtain slipping from my fingers, my heart slamming against my ribs. The knocks were forceful now, almost angry, each one reverberating through the house like a demand. I rushed back to the peephole, my breath fogging the glass, but the porch was still empty, the snow pristine. The silence between knocks was deafening, a void that seemed to swallow sound. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for footsteps, a voice, anything. Then I heard it. Soft crunching, like boots on snow, moving across the porch toward the side of the house. My stomach dropped. Someone was circling, testing, their movements deliberate, yet leaving no trace in the snow. I grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter, its blade cold and heavy, my hands trembling as I gripped it. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a faint scraping like nails dragging across the exterior walls. Slow and deliberate, circling toward the back door. I crept to the kitchen, staying low, my pulse deafening in my ears. 3 more knocks came, this time from the back door's glass pane, each one sharp and mocking. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, deliberate, rattling the glass. I peered through the small window, my breath fogging the cold glass, but saw nothing, just the dark backyard, the shed barely visible, the snow untouched. Yet a shadow flickered across the pane, tall and distorted, gone when I blinked. My phone, still in my hand, showed no service now, though it had been fine minutes ago. My heart raced as I tried the landline, but it was dead, emitting only static laced with a faint, distorted whisper. "Open the door." I dropped the receiver, my hands shaking, the knife nearly slipping. The house felt like a trap, its walls closing in, the silence no longer empty but alive with the stranger's intent, as if he and the house were waiting for me to break. The relentless knocks at midnight had transformed my isolated house in upstate New York from a sanctuary into a cage. Their deliberate rhythm knock, 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 echoing in my mind as I crouched in the kitchen, clutching a knife. The air was thick, heavy with a cold that seeped through the walls despite the radiator's faint hum. The house's silence now a conspirator in the stranger's game. I was 29, a graphic designer living alone, miles from any neighbor, and the pristine snow outside showed no footprints, no trace of the figure whose presence pressed against the doors and windows. The peephole revealed nothing, but the scraping of nails along the walls and the whispered "open the door" through the dead landline had rooted me in fear. My heart pounding as the house seemed to hum with a low, guttural pulse, as if it were alive, watching me. The knocks at the back door had stopped, but the silence was worse, dense, suffocating, charged with an unseen presence. My hands shook, the knife's cold blades slick with sweat, as I crept back to the living room, my bare feet catching on the hardwood's uneven grain. The lamplight flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed to twist at the edges of my vision, as if the house were shifting, aligning itself with the stranger outside. I couldn't stay still. I had to know who was out there, why they were tormenting me. I inched toward the front window, my breath shallow, and parted the heavy curtain, just enough to peek into the darkness. That's when I saw him. A figure stood at the edge of my driveway, tall and unnaturally thin, his long coat swaying in the faint wind, its collar pulled high, obscuring his face in shadow. The streetlight's pale glow caught the edges of his form, but his features were swallowed by darkness, as if the night clung to him, refusing to let him be seen. My heart thudded, my breath fogging the cold glass, the knife trembling in my hand. He stood motionless, his head tilted slightly, as if staring directly at the house at me. The snow around him was untouched, no footprints marking his path, as if he'd appeared from nowhere. My voice, barely a whisper, cracked as I called out through the door. "Who's there? What do you want?" No answer, just the faint whistle of wind and the crunch of snow settling, though he hadn't moved. Then the knocks returned. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, deliberate, from the front door, shaking the frame. My blood ran cold. He was at the door now, inches from where I stood, but I hadn't seen him move. No footsteps, no shadow crossing the yard. One moment he was at the driveway's edge. The next, his presence pressed against the door, the knocks heavy, deliberate, as if testing its strength. I checked the peephole, my hands trembling so badly. I fumbled the knife, but the porch was empty, the snow pristine. Yet the knocks continued, each one louder, more insistent, vibrating through the wood into my bones. My mind raced. How was he moving so fast? Why couldn't I see him? Was he even human? I crept to the side window, my pulse deafening, and peered into the backyard. The figure was there now, standing near the shed, his coat blending into the shadows, his head tilted, as if listening for me. The porch light flickered, then died, plunging the yard into darkness. But I felt his eyes cold, unyielding, boring through the glass. My breath caught, and I ducked below the windowsill, my heart pounding so loud I feared he'd hear it. The knocks came again, now from the back door, each one a deliberate challenge, rattling the glass pane. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, mocking. From the back door, I crawled to the kitchen, staying low, and peeked through the small window. The backyard was empty, but a shadow flickered across the glass, tall, distorted, its edges blurring like smoke. The hum in the house grew louder, vibrating through the floorboards, as if the stranger's presence had awakened something within the walls. I checked my phone again. No service. The screen flickering as if taunted. The landline static returned, now laced with a faint, guttural whisper. "Let me in." My stomach dropped, the knife nearly slipping from my grip. The house felt like a living thing now, its shadows shifting, its silence mocking, as if it were conspiring with the stranger to trap me, to make me answer the door. My isolated house in upstate New York, into a prison of fear. His knocks, slow, deliberate, mocking, echoing from the front door to the back. His tall, shadowed figure, appearing and vanishing, without a trace in the untouched snow. I was 29, a graphic designer living alone, miles from any neighbor. And the house's once comforting silence now felt like a trap, its walls humming with a low, guttural pulse that seemed to sync with my racing heart. The knife in my hand, cold and slick with sweat, offered little comfort as the stranger circled, his coat swaying in the darkness, his face hidden, but his intent clear. The whispered, "Let me in," through the dead landline, and the flickering porch light had shattered any hope of rationalizing this as a prank. The house was alive, complicit, its shadows shifting, as if welcoming the stranger's presence. The knocks grew louder, more aggressive, shaking the back door's glass pane with a force that rattled the frame. Pounding sound. Bam, bam, bam. Wood creaking, glass trembling, each blow echoing like a heartbeat. The sound reverberated through the house, each strike a hammer to my nerves, shaking me to my core. I crouched in the kitchen, the knife trembling in my grip, my breath shallow and ragged. The air was frigid now, the radiator's hum silenced, replaced by a low, guttural hum that seemed to rise from the floorboards, vibrating through my feet. I grabbed my phone, desperate to call 911, but the screen mocked me with no service, though it had shown full bars minutes ago. The landline was still dead, its static now a constant drone, laced with faint, distorted whispers. "Open the door. Let me in." My heart pounded as I realized the impossibility. This house was in a strong signal area, yet something was cutting me off, isolating me. The stranger's footsteps returned, crunching against the frozen ground, circling the house, front porch, side yard, back door, then front again. The rhythm was relentless, too fast to be human, as if he were everywhere at once. I crawled to the living room, staying low, my bare feet catching on the hardwood's uneven grain. The lamplight flickered violently, casting jagged shadows that seemed to twist and stretch, as if the house were alive, aligning itself with the stranger's intent. I peeked through the blinds, my breath fogging the cold glass, and saw him at the edge of the yard, his long coat swaying, his head tilted, as if listening for me. A shadow flickered across the blinds, tall, distorted, moving too quickly to track, its edges blurring like smoke. The scraping returned, louder now, like nails dragging across the exterior walls, slow and deliberate, circling the house. I checked the windows, my hands shaking as I tested each latch, but they felt loose, as if tampered with, though I'd secured them hours ago. The back door rattled again, 3 sharp knocks mocking, insistent, followed by a new sound. A soft tap against the kitchen window, like a finger testing the glass. I spun around, the knife raised, but the window showed only darkness, the snow outside pristine. Yet the shadow flickered again, closer now, its shape stretching across the glass, as if the stranger were pressing against it. My pulse deafened me, my mind screaming to hide, to fight, to do something. But fear rooted me in place. I crept to the hallway, checking the side door, and froze. A faint handprint, muddy, too long-fingered, marked the glass, its edges fresh, as if pressed moments ago. I hadn't heard footsteps approach, hadn't seen the figure move. The hum in the house grew louder, vibrating through the walls, as if the stranger's presence had awakened something within the house itself. I backed away, my breath catching, and tried the landline again, static, now louder, the whisper clearer. You can't hide. The knife felt useless. The house no longer mine, its walls closing in, its silence a conspirator in the stranger's relentless hunt. The relentless assault of knocks and scrapes had turned my isolated house in upstate New York into a battlefield, the stranger's presence a suffocating force that pressed against every door and window. I was 29, a graphic designer living alone, miles from any neighbor, and the house once my sanctuary now felt alive, its walls humming with a guttural pulse that mirrored my racing heart. The knife in my hand, slick with sweat, was a flimsy defense against the figure whose tall, shadowed form moved impossibly fast, leaving no footprints in the pristine snow. The pounding knocks, the whispered, "Let me in," through the dead landline, and the muddy, too long-fingered handprint on the side door's glass had shattered any hope of this being a prank. The house was complicit, its flickering lamplight and shifting shadows aligning with the stranger's intent, as if it wanted him inside as much as he did. The knock stopped abruptly, leaving a silence that was worse, thick, suffocating, heavy with the weight of an unseen presence. I crouched in the living room, the knife trembling in my grip, my breath shallow and ragged, each exhale fogging the cold air. The radiator's hum was gone, replaced by a low, guttural drone that vibrated through the hardwood floor, as if the house itself were breathing, waiting. Minutes stretched into an eternity, each second a test of my nerve, my pulse deafening in my ears. I crept toward the front door, my bare feet catching on the uneven floorboards, their creaks loud in the oppressive quiet. I pressed my eye to the peephole, my hands shaking, the glass icy against my skin. He was there. The figure stood motionless on the porch, inches from the door, his long coat swaying faintly, though no wind stirred the snow outside. His collar was pulled high, his face hidden in shadow, as if the darkness clung to him, refusing to let him be seen. He didn't knock, didn't move, just stood there, his presence a physical weight pressing against the door, as if he could force it open with intent alone. My breath caught, my body frozen, every nerve screaming to stay silent, to not draw his attention. The silence was unbearable, worse than the knocks, broken only by the faint crunch of snow settling outside, though he hadn't shifted. Then, he leaned forward, so close the door seemed to tremble under his presence. A low, distorted whisper slithered through the wood, chilling and deliberate. "Let me in." I stumbled backward, my heart in my throat, the knife clattering to the floor. The whisper echoed in my mind, as if it had come from inside the house, from the walls themselves. My eyes darted to the windows, the blinds, the shadows expecting him to appear, to break through. I grabbed the knife again, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it, and checked the peephole once more. The porch was empty, the snow untouched, the streetlights glow steady, but the hum in the house grew louder, vibrating through the floorboards, up my spine, as if the stranger's words had awakened something within the walls. I crept to the kitchen, checking the back door, and froze a new handprint, muddy and too long-fingered, marked the glass, its edges fresh, as if pressed moments ago, though I'd heard no footsteps. The silence held, but it was a predator's pause, charged with intent. I backed against the wall, knife raised, my eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The lamplight flickered violently, casting twisted shapes that seemed to move, to watch. My phone, useless with its no service warning, flickered again, the screen briefly showing a distorted image, a blurry figure in a long coat, standing outside my window, though no one was there when I looked. The landline static returned, louder now, the whisper clearer. "You can't hide." My stomach dropped, my mind screaming that this wasn't just a man, he was part of the house, part of the land, something that knew my fear and fed on it. The walls seemed to lean in, the hum pulsing faster, as if the house and the stranger were one, waiting for me to break, to open the door, and let him in. The standoff with the stranger at my door had stretched my nerves to the breaking point. The house, at the edge of upstate New York, no longer a home but a living trap. I was 29, a graphic designer living alone, miles from any neighbor, and the relentless knocks, the whispered, "Let me in," and the muddy, too long-fingered handprints on the glass had confirmed this was no prank. The stranger, tall, shadowed, impossibly fast, stood motionless on my porch moments ago, his presence a suffocating weight, yet vanished when I checked again, leaving no trace in the pristine snow. The house hummed with a guttural pulse, its walls complicit, the flickering lamplight casting shadows that seemed to watch me. I crouched against the front door, knife in hand, my breath shallow, every nerve raw from the silence that followed his whisper, a silence heavier than the knocks, as if the house and the stranger were waiting for me to break. The quiet held, a predator's pause that stretched into an eternity, each second tightening the knot in my chest. The radiator's hum was gone, replaced by a low, vibrating drone that pulsed through the hardwood floor, up my spine, as if the house were alive, breathing in sync with the stranger's intent. My hands shook, the knife slick with sweat, as I sat with my back pressed to the door, its cold wood grounding me against the fear. The clock on the wall ticked past 1 a.m., each second louder, mocking my stillness. I strained to hear anything: footsteps, a knock, a whisper, but the silence was deafening, broken only by the faint whistle of wind outside, carrying the scent of snow through the cracks. I dared to check the peephole again, my heart pounding, the glass icy against my skin. The porch was empty, the snow untouched, the streetlight's pale glow steady. No figure, no coat, no sign of anyone. I crept to the kitchen, checking the back door, and found the handprint still there, muddy, too long-fingered, its edges fresh, as if pressed moments ago. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard footsteps, hadn't seen the stranger move. I checked every window, my breath fogging the glass, but the yard was pristine, the shed dark and still. The house felt different now, its silence no longer comforting but watchful, as if it had let the stranger in and was hiding him in its shadows. Desperate, I grabbed my phone, its screen flickering but showing a weak signal: one bar, flickering in and out. I dialed 911, my voice trembling as I whispered the details. The knocks, the figure, the handprints, the whispers. The operator's voice was calm but skeptical, promising a patrol car within 20 minutes. "Stay safe. Lock the doors," she said, but her tone suggested a prank, not a threat. I set the phone down, the knife still in my hand, and waited, my eyes darting to every shadow, every corner. The hum in the house softened but didn't stop, vibrating faintly, as if the walls were holding their breath, waiting for the stranger to return. The police arrived at 1:30 a.m., their flashlights sweeping the property, their boots crunching in the snow. I opened the door, my hands shaking, and pointed to the handprint on the back door's glass. They examined it, frowning, but found nothing else. No footprints, no tire tracks, no sign of a visitor. "Could be kids," one officer said, but his partner, older and quieter, stared at the house, his eyes uneasy. "This place always felt off," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. They left, advising me to keep the doors locked and call if it happened again. I nodded, but as their car pulled away, I noticed something new on the front doormat. A single muddy handprint, its fingers too long, too thin, pressed into the fabric as if burned. It hadn't been there when they searched. The house's hum grew louder, a faint whisper weaving through it. "You're mine." The stranger's vanishing left my isolated house in upstate New York steeped in an eerie stillness. But the terror of that February night in 2023 lingered like a stain. I was 29, a graphic designer living alone, miles from any neighbor, and the relentless knocks, the whispered, "Let me in," and the muddy, two long-fingered handprints on the glass had stripped away any sense of safety. The police had come and gone, finding no footprints, no tire tracks, only the unsettling handprint on the back door's glass, and another on the front doormat, its fingers unnaturally long, as if burned into the fabric. The house's guttural hum, pulsing through the walls, had softened but never stopped, as if it were waiting, complicit in the stranger's intent. I sat through the dawn, knife in hand, my back against the front door, the air heavy with a cold that seeped from the walls. The silence no longer a refuge, but a predator's pause. The police returned at sunrise, their flashlights replaced by skeptical frowns as they photographed the handprints. "Probably kids messing around," the younger officer said. But his partner, older and quieter, lingered by the back door, his eyes tracing the jagged, smile-like scratches that had appeared overnight on the glass. Too high for an animal. They found no matches for the prints, no evidence of a visitor, and their search of the snowy yard revealed nothing but pristine powder. "Keep the doors locked," they advised before leaving, their tires crunching as they drove away. I scrubbed the doormat until my hands were raw, the muddy handprint fading but leaving a faint outline, like a scar. The back door's glass was harder soap, and water couldn't erase the scratches, their jagged lines catching the morning light like a mocking grin. The house felt tainted, its walls holding on to the stranger's presence. I installed new deadbolts, their clicks loud in the silence, and checked the windows obsessively. But the latches felt loose, as if tampered with in the night. The radiator's hum returned, but it was laced with a faint guttural drone, vibrating through the floorboards, as if the house were whispering back to me. I avoided the mirrors, their reflections showing shadows that seemed to linger too long. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind, sounded like footsteps circling outside. I posted on X, desperate for answers. Stranger knocked at midnight. Left handprints, no footprints in snow. Real horror. Most replies were jokes, but one anonymous message chilled me. "That house has a history. Get out before he comes back." I dug into local records online, my hands trembling as I scrolled through archives. Vague mentions of missing persons linked to the area surfaced: hikers, drifters, even a family who'd lived on this land decades ago, all vanishing without a trace. A 1950s newspaper clipping mentioned a tall man in a long coat seen near the property, blamed for unsettling locals, but no arrests, no proof. The anonymous X message burned in my mind, suggesting the house, or the land, held secrets older than its walls. That night, I found my keys, left on the kitchen counter, now on the coffee table. Though I lived alone, a glass I'd washed was back in the sink, its rim smudged with a faint, muddy mark. The hum grew louder at night, and 3 sharp knocks echoed at 3 a.m., not from the door, but from the walls themselves, as if the stranger had never left. The house was no longer mine. Its silence was watchful, its shadows alive, as if the stranger had marked it, claimed it. I lay awake, the knife beside me, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, waiting for the next sign. The air felt heavier, the cold deeper, and every night I sensed him out there, or worse, inside, his presence woven into the house's pulse, waiting for me to let my guard down. The aftermath of that terrifying night in February 2023 had left my isolated house in upstate New York feeling like a stranger's domain, its walls tainted by the muddy, 2 long-fingered handprints and jagged scratches that no amount of scrubbing could erase. I was 29, a graphic designer living alone, miles from any neighbor, and the relentless knocks, the whispered, "Let me in," and the house's guttural hum had stripped away any illusion of safety. The police found no trace of the tall, shadowed figure who circled my home, leaving no footprints in the pristine snow. But the house itself seemed complicit, its silence watchful, its shadows alive with his presence. My research into local records, vague mentions of missing persons and a tall man in a long coat tied to this land only deepened my dread, echoed by an anonymous X message. That house has a history. Get out before he comes back. I installed new locks, kept the knife close, and avoided sleep. But the house's pulse never faded, its walls whispering in the dark, as if the stranger had claimed it and me. A week passed, and I clung to the hope that it was over. I kept the lights on, played music to drown out the silence, and avoided the windows, their blinds drawn tight against the darkness. The lease trapped me, and the town's isolation made moving feel impossible. The memory of the stranger's whisper, "Let me in," haunted every quiet moment, and the faint, muddy smudge on the glass in the sink, the keys moved to the coffee table, kept my nerves raw. I stopped posting on X, the anonymous message burning in my mind, and checked the locks obsessively, their clicks loud in the heavy air. But the house felt different, its silence no longer empty but expectant, as if it were waiting for him to return. Then, on the seventh night, it happened again. The clock struck midnight, and 3 slow knocks echoed through the house, not from the front door, but the back. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, deliberate, rattling the back door's glass pane. My heart stopped, the knife leaping into my hand as I froze in the living room, the lamplight flickering violently. The knocks were louder, more demanding, each one shaking the frame, as if the stranger were pressing his weight against it. I crept to the kitchen, staying low, my bare feet cold on the hardwood, the house's guttural hum rising to meet the knocks. I peered through the back door's small window, my breath fogging the glass, and saw him, the tall, thin figure, his long coat swaying in the windless night, his face hidden in shadow, his head tilted, as if listening for me. The snow outside was pristine, no footprints marking his path, as if he'd materialized from the darkness itself. The knock stopped, replaced by a soft scraping like nails dragging across the glass, slow and deliberate, forming a jagged, smile-like pattern. My pulse deafened me, my hands trembling. As I checked my phone, no service, the screen flickering with a distorted image of the backyard, showing the figure standing closer, though he hadn't moved when I looked again. The landline was dead, its static now, a chorus of whispers. "You're mine." I backed away, the knife raised, and checked the front door. Through the peephole, the porch was empty, but a new handprint, muddy, too long-fingered, marked the glass, its edges fresh, as if pressed moments ago. I hadn't heard footsteps, hadn't seen him move. The house's hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls, up my spine, as if the stranger and the house were one, their intent woven together. I stumbled to the living room, my eyes darting to the blinds, where a shadow flickered tall, distorted, its edges blurring like smoke. The air grew colder, the radiator silent, and a faint giggle, high-pitched, not human, slipped through the walls, as if the house itself were laughing. My keys, left on the counter, were now on the floor, arranged in a perfect circle. The realization hit me like a blow. He wasn't just a man. He was part of this place, tied to the land's dark history, and he'd chosen me. The house wasn't just a stage for his terror. It was his ally, its walls alive with his will, waiting for me to break. The stranger's return on the 7th night had plunged my isolated house in upstate New York into a nightmare from which there was no escape. I was 29, a graphic designer living alone, miles from any neighbor. And the house, once my sanctuary, had become a conspirator, its walls pulsing with a guttural hum that echoed the stranger's relentless intent. The muddy, too long-fingered handprints, the jagged scratches forming a smile-like pattern, and the whispered, "You're mine," Through the dead landline confirmed he was no ordinary intruder. The house was alive, its shadows shifting, its silence, laughing with a high-pitched giggle that wasn't human. My keys arranged in a circle, the flickering phone screen showing his distorted form, and the absence of footprints in the pristine snow suggested he was tied to the land's dark history. A history of missing persons and a tall man in a long coat that haunted local records. The house wasn't just a stage for his terror. It was his ally, and it had chosen me. I moved a month later, breaking my lease, leaving behind furniture, clothes, and the illusion of safety I'd once cherished. The new tenant, a young couple with bright smiles, moved into the house at the edge of town, unaware of the handprints, the scratches, the whispers woven into its walls. I couldn't warn them, words failed me, and the fear of being thought unhinged kept me silent. But rumors reached me through the town's sparse ex-posts. Flickering lights in the house, knocks at midnight, a tall figure in a long coat, seen lingering near their shed. The couple's posts, once cheerful, grew sparse. Their last update a cryptic, "Something's not right here, moving out soon." I settled into a small apartment 50 miles away, but the stranger's presence clung to me like a shadow. At night, I heard 3 sharp knocks at 3 a.m., not from the door, but from the walls, echoing the rhythm of that terrifying night. My new locks, checked obsessively, felt loose, and my keys sometimes moved counter to table to floor, though I lived alone. A glass left in the sink appeared with a faint, muddy smudge, its edges too long, too thin. I stopped looking in mirrors, afraid of what might stare back, and my phone occasionally flickered, showing a blurry image of a tall figure in a coat, though I deleted it each time. The anonymous X message, "That house has a history," haunted me, and further research revealed more. The land under 47 Maple Lane was a sacred site, soaked in blood from rituals older than the town, a place that called to figures like the stranger, binding them to its will. The house stands as it always has, its windows dark but watchful, its silence a predator's pause. It's not just haunted, it's alive, a vessel for something ancient, fed by fear and blood. The couple who moved in may have fled, or worse, vanished, their names fading like those before them. I still hear the knocks in my dreams, feel the weight of his presence, see the shadow of a too wide smile in the corners of my vision. I check my locks, my windows, my phone signal, always waiting for the next knock, knowing he's out there or worse, inside, woven into the walls of my life. Would you answer a knock at midnight knowing it might not be human? Would you stay in a place that knows your fears, that claims you as its own? Or do you believe some houses, some lands, are better left empty, their doors unanswered, their secrets buried? Because once a stranger like that finds you, he never truly leaves. And somewhere, in the silence of that house, he's waiting for you. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe and like